Welcome back to the channel, you guys. As you guys saw in the last video, we just finished painting the engine bay of the BMW. So if you missed that video, go back and watch that one. We did it a gloss Nardo gray. But today, in this video, we are going to be rebuilding this M20 that came out of the car. When I bought it, it had a 2.7 liter ETA bottom end, and it actually had the 885 head off of the 2.5 liter, a little bit sportier, better flowing head. However, it does lower compression just a little bit because it is a little bit taller. However, when you're doing a turbo build, that's not really too bad of a thing to have. It's actually a pretty popular setup for people that are turboing stock motor cars. I do have a better head gasket on it, as well as some ARP studs that are going to be going in it. So today I actually just finished up, and I didn't film this part because it is a little bit tedious, taking off this front cover for the crank seal, and this is actually the oil pump drive gear. So I pulled this off, replaced both of these seals, put this gasket on. We're just about to start torquing this down. After that, we are going to get ready to paint this block and start putting the accessories back together on the front of it, as well as putting in the head studs. So I will set up a time lapse and show you guys the process of trying to get all of that stuff put together, and I'll be back with you guys here in just a bit. I'm going to cut in real quick here on the time lapse as soon as I got this all torqued down here to show you guys. One thing I forgot to mention in it is that I actually have all new hardware for assembling the motor. So it's all nice zinc coated hardware for everything. It's all a complete kit that you're able to order online. They actually have full chassis kits if you're rebuilding the chassis. I got the engine kit, and each one of them comes in a little bag labeled out. It's a great product, and that will all be going back together with new hardware. I did mention this in the engine teardown video if you guys saw that, but this is the oil pump pulley that I took off of the car, and this is just a stamped piece of metal, and these are notorious for breaking under boost. So it is a pretty big issue that a lot of people actually end up swapping over to this centered gear. And this is a forged gear instead that is just so much stronger and not going to break. So I did get one of those to be able to put on this when I'm putting it back together, since it will be boosted. I don't want to do all this work and have any issue of my timing belt failing and dropping a valve because of a little $25 pulley. The water pump is on, the timing belt tensioner is on, the oil pump gear is on, the crankshaft sprocket is on, and this actually has the pulley that bolts to the front. We're not torquing this bolt down yet because that is actually rated for, I believe it's 300 foot-pounds, and I'm not going to do that until I have some way to be able to hold back the crank, because there's no way I'm getting that much torque on it without it spinning. Wanted to do one of these real time so that you guys could see exactly what's going on rather than just speeding it up so much. So these are Allen heads that are in the engine currently. They're 8mm Allens. So I just break the Allens loose first, remove one head stud at a time. It's already got a better head gasket on it, and rather than trying to separate the head again, since I knew that it was sealed, I knew that it was working well, I'm just going to swap these head bolts out for head studs one at a time, which I have never done before, but from reading what others have done online, you know how that goes. I hope it's true, and if they're wrong, then I'll be dealing with this later. But remove them one at a time, and you can swap them, and there's no issue. After I'm pulling out the head bolts that are in it currently, I've actually got a bolt right here with a groove cut in on both sides. And this is a stock head bolt that came out of one of these engines. And being able to do this lets you use it like a thread chaser. And you can usually thread them in super easily by finger, but that just makes sure that the threads get cleaned out real good. And it is well worth doing when you're going to be replacing this stuff. If you don't, especially if you're putting head bolts back in rather than studs, you can start running into issues because there may be binding on the threads, which is causing you to not reach the proper torque spec. And when you pull it out, you can actually see, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it too well on camera here, but there is a little bit of trash that got inside of there. So using this on each head bolt hole is a good idea. And then I grab out one of these head studs. ARP has this assembly lubricant. It's like a pretty thick grease, but it works really well. And these little packs that they come in, they send these packs with all of their hardware, and they last far longer than one set of bolts is needing. So you just put just a little bit of that up there on the end of it. Go ahead and thread these in. They tell you they do them just finger tight, which I can do, but every once in a while they'll get a little bit hard to turn by hand as it starts to just run down inside of there. So I usually take my Allen and just loosely tighten it. And when it gets tight, I loosen it up, back it down, make sure that it's actually all the way seated, not caught up on something. And then once I got just a little bit of tension, I don't put much on it, I go ahead and remove the Allen. You want to grab one washer and one of these 12mm 12-point nuts that they use. You put just a little tiny bit of grease on the bottom of the washer. And some of them don't want you to have any sort of lubricant on the bottom of these washers. The ones in a different one of the vehicles I've built in the past, they actually have a little knurling on the bottom of the washer that's supposed to grip it to the head. They want that as clean as possible, nothing on it for it to slip. But the instructions for these specific head studs say to grease the washer as well. So I'm just going along with what they say on that. I run this finger tight first, and then break out the torque wrench. The final torque setting on this is 70 foot-pounds. They do recommend, if you're installing these, to do it in 3 steps. So a lot of people would start out at 25, torque all of the head studs down, then do 50, and then the final step would be 70. However, since I'm replacing one of these at a time, I go directly to the torque spec because everything else is already torqued. They recommend doing that so that you don't risk unevenly torquing the head, and then you put it in a little bit of a bind and it might not fully seal on one area. The first little bit is you start putting some torque on it. It'll go pretty easy and you don't have to be super specific. But then as I'm starting to get close, I start to slow down. I don't want to overshoot. I want to make sure I don't hear that bolt start clicking or the torque starting to slip, because that may mean that I have an issue with the stud itself. And then this will beep when I hit my torque spec. I maxed that out at 70.1 foot-pounds. So this digital torque wrench is Icon from Harbor Freight. So far, I've really enjoyed it. I've only used it a couple of times, but it's been great for me so far. You can just as easily use a standard click style torque wrench and have absolutely no issue. I've just been doing work for long enough and building enough of them. I wanted to try out a digital torque wrench, but I was not wanting to spend the $800 or so that Snap-on charges for theirs. And all of the torque tests and YouTube channels that compare the two say that they're pretty comparable in performance. So I figured I'd give that Icon one a try. And like I said, so far it's been great. The first engine I built with it, I double checked it with my Tecton click style torque wrench afterwards and just saw if I was at the same torque specs, and it was accurate compared to that, which I've used and trust in the past. So I let it go. But that is how you do each one of these head bolt to head studs. I will go ahead and start back up the time lapse to show you guys the rest of this getting completed. That should be everything. Just got the final studs torqued down, and then as you saw at the very end of that clip, once I got everything torqued, I went back through and just checked the torque on each one of the nuts on here. And the best practice is to let it settle for a little bit. You know, there's, with some of that tension and everything, you actually can build up a little bit of heat. So if you let it sit, then retorque them one more time, and then the more important step that a lot of people don't do but is recommended by a lot of engine builders is do your first heat cycle, maybe 2 heat cycles. Just make sure you get some heat in the motor, let everything kind of move around how it's going to while the engine is running. Take the valve cover back off and retorque all of your head studs, head bolts, whatever it may be again, to just check and make sure that they are perfectly up to torque spec, especially when you're boosting a motor and you have issues with potentially lifting a head. So now, you guys, we are going to paint the engine block. This has been all cleaned off and prepped over here. The only thing I'm really gonna do, since I didn't take the head off of the block before I painted, or at all actually, I wasn't able to do that to paint it. So I'm just going to tape off around the head the best that I can. And then I've got some plastic sheeting down here, which this is what was held over the glass on the car when I was painting. I'm gonna go ahead and put that over the top of the head, cut it down a little bit, and then tape again around it, just to try to keep everything covered, try to keep everything along the front of the motor covered, and just tape stuff up as best I can so that the only place that I get paint is on the block itself. But we are going with a satin black, just out of a spray can again. This is a engine paint that is made by Rust-Oleum. I've used their high heat paint in the past and I've liked it. That's actually the same clear that I put on the engine bay, was the Rust-Oleum engine enamel paint. So we're gonna use that today. I haven't used this specific paint from them before, but I figured it would turn out a little bit better maybe if I did satin instead of doing a gloss or anything on the block, since there are some imperfections. So I'm gonna get this set up, go ahead and start taping everything off, and I'll get back with you guys here shortly. last clip got cut just a little bit short because my phone died, but we are all good and ready to go. It is fully taped off. Layer of tape down first, like you guys saw, kind of helps protect all of it, and then the plastic over the top with some more tape to seal it, and it should stay sealed pretty good. Most of this stuff is covered, especially this transition line right between the block and the head. That's covered by both the exhaust manifold and then on the other side the intake manifold. The front of the motor's covered by covers as well, the front covers for the pulleys and such, so you're not really going to see it if it does bleed through just a little bit, but I did want it as good as possible. The oil pan I didn't worry about because it's still dirty. It's going to be coming off, and I'm actually going to have to weld in a oil drain for the turbo onto it, so I can just clean off any paint that does get onto that. So I'm not too concerned, but we are going to go ahead and do one final wipe down of the block and then start painting. First coat is down. So I did this one pretty light. I did try to cover it, make sure I got pretty full coverage on both sides, and looks pretty good. For a first coat, it should smooth out quite a bit once I get the next couple of coats on, and I'll be able to touch up any spots that I may miss. Luckily, with this being the engine block again, it's not going to be seen. It's not super critical that it's perfect, but I do want it to look nice. I don't want to do anything that's just low quality and doesn't give a good finished product. I did realize once I spun the motor around that I forgot to tape off the oil filter connection on the side of the block. So I went ahead and taped that up quick, and any little bit around this outside here that I cut the tape off of, I'll be able to go back and kind of Scotch-Brite that off, clean it up a little bit before the oil cooler adapter gets bolted on there. But that is the first coat, and I'll just probably wait and update you guys again once it is completely painted. That is it. I just finished up painting the block. It's been about 20 or 30 minutes since I put the final coat on, and I went ahead and removed all of the tape and anything that may have paint on it, just so that I made sure that I did not get any that stuck, because if you wait too long and you wait for it to be completely dry, then there is a chance that when you go to peel the painter's tape off, you actually can peel some of the paint off as well. So it is recommended to peel the paint off before, or the tape off before it is completely dry. So I went ahead and did that. That is about as far as we're gonna get on the painting for stuff on the motor. We've got some powder coating that I'm gonna do, but I've got several parts that we plan on powder coating, so I'm gonna do a separate video on that to show you guys the final product of the motor. But that looks so much better than it did before with the paint on the block now. Just makes everything very uniform and really cleaned up the entire look. As we get into the rocker arm clearances, the valve lash on these, it is a little bit of a time-consuming process, so I'm going to go ahead and just show you guys on one of these how it's done, in case you may be out there trying to do this on your E30. You need a little bit of help trying to figure out exactly how to do it, but then I will just skip to the end of when these are done. So the first thing that you want to do is you're going to need a ratchet and a socket on your crank so that you can turn over the motor as you go. You want to get to the base portion of the camshaft. So that is the lowest position where pretty much there's no tension on these rockers at all from the cam, because you do not want to try to set lash when there's any kind of pressure on this rocker arm on the camshaft itself, or it will throw it out of spec. you want about 10 thou. You can see on this gauge, you may be able to see 10 to 12 thou or 0.25 millimeters is the recommended cold valve lash on an M20. It's 10 to 12 thou is kind of what's recommended. So I'm doing 10, keep it just a little bit tighter. But you will take this, I bent this one over a little bit to make it a little bit easier to try to fit inside of there. And you can tell right now, I am unable to get this inside of the area between the top of the rocker arm and the top of the valve. So my lash is too tight. So to be able to adjust that, you want to be able to get something small. You either use a real small screwdriver or an Allen or something that you can put inside of there that you can hold it, and then a 10 millimeter wrench that you can break loose the nut that is on the side of this rocker, and that will loosen it up. And as you can see, now that it's loose, it allows this inside of this rocker to be able to rotate. Doing that, you're able to set lash where you need it with this in position. The next thing that you want to do is set it right in a spot that you're able to get this right inside between the rocker and the top of the valve. And you want it to be just tight enough that you're able to slide this in and out. You don't want it to pinch it so tight that you're not able to get it in and out. But you also don't want it really loose where it's gonna just wiggle itself around and not actually be that clearance. So you want to set that, get it right where it's just a little bit snug, try to slide this feeler gauge in and out, and then tighten this back down. Once it's tight, you want to take this feeler gauge and slide it back and forth in there a little bit, and make sure that now once you have some tension back on that, that it is not too tight, that there's not any chance that it's changed the position that it's at. One more time, I tightened it down all the way, testing it, and I can feel resistance. It is both touching the top of the valve as well as the bottom of the rocker arm at the same time. Just barely enough clearance. There's no up and down play in this at all. So that is right where it needs to be. You need to go through and do that with every one of the valves. You just rotate the motor over until the bottom portion of the cam is right on that rocker. Set your lash on each one. You want to do this while it's cold. There is also a hot spec that you can heat up the motor. You can get it all the way up to operating temperature, shut it off, and then come back in the motor, do the same process again with it warm, and then you can check your warm lash. And they should be within range after you set your cold lash, but if they're not, you can adjust them just a little bit when it's warm, and then once it cools back down again, you want to check it cold one more time and make sure that you are still within range on the rocker arms. So since it is a pretty time-consuming process, I'm gonna cut the clip here, and I will get back to you guys when I have all of them done. And just like that, we have finished lashing all of these valves. It takes probably about half an hour or so to get done. So not too difficult, but it's just the exact same thing over and over again. But with that being done on the motor, I also just checked the torque on my head studs one more time, and that is good. I will say one thing, because I told you guys a little bit wrong. If you happen to be watching this while you're building your M20 and you have ARP head studs, please do not listen to the same thing that I just said in that last clip of the grease going on the bottom of these washers as well. Like I said, when I've built previous motors with ARP hardware, it said don't get any grease on the bottom of these washers, keep the surface as dry as possible. And this one didn't seem to say that in the same spot in the instructions that most of my previous ones have. However, I did do a little bit of reading into it afterwards, and they do say do not grease the bottom of the washers. I did and luckily it didn't cause an issue for me, but it is possible to cause an issue. You don't really want that to spin, because then the stud can start to tighten, and if you try to torque the stud when it's meant to just be a stud, not a bolt, you do have a risk of actually snapping off that stud. So just keep that in mind. If you're watching this as kind of a tutorial type video, please do not put any ARP grease on the bottom of those washers, or you do have a chance of damaging something. But with that being said, everything build-wise on the motor is pretty much done. The rest of everything is kind of dress up and assembly of some of the turbo components. So I do plan on having the install of the turbo kit be probably my next video, maybe 2 videos down the road, because I do want to show you guys the one other car that I've got that I want to put on the channel. So you may get that video, you may get the video of actually mocking up this turbo kit, but that should be pretty much everything for this video of putting the head studs in this motor, reassembling the whole front end of this motor, and putting in these head bolts. The motor is now ready to have the covers and everything put back together. We're not going to do a final assembly of this until, like I said, we mock up the turbo kit, just because there are a couple of colors and things that I don't want to show you guys until it's all ready to go on, and we have not powder coated yet. That will be in the next video that you guys see on the motor. But thank you guys for watching today. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to click the like button down below, subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with this build and the next build that I'm going to show you guys. Hopefully this thing is running soon and ripping, and you guys really enjoy what else I have in plan for this car.